You hold a sacred democratic ballot in your hand.
And
I mean, you live in a modern system, right?
right, you absolutely have the right to choose.
Exactly. You have the right to choose. So why is it that when you walk into the voting booth, you are, like, completely incapable of electing the most capable leader?
It is wild to think about. It really is.
Why do voters, when given total freedom, just intentionally choose obedient fools over brilliant managers?
It's basically the ultimate paradox of modern freedom. I mean, we are taught from a very young age that a democratic election is this perfect filter.
Like a meritocracy.
Yeah, exactly. We just assume that if you give people a ballot, the cream will naturally rise to the top.
That the most competent, the most visionary people will just get elevated to power.
Right. But the reality on the ground, especially at the hyper-local level, is often a complete subversion of that ideal.
Which is exactly what we're getting into today. We are tearing down that beautiful, comforting facade of grassroots democracy.
We really are.
We are going to expose this terrifying, ancient shadow order that is actually running the show behind the scenes.
It sounds like a movie, but it's just raw data.
It is. We are looking at thousands of Indian villages where modern voting was introduced to fix a chaotic, failing public service system.
And we're going to look at how that modern system completely collapsed under its own contradictions.
Only to be quietly hijacked by an invisible bloodline network.
It's fascinating. Our source material for this deep dive is a massive, myth-shattering investigation from 2013.
The one from Brown and Yale, right?
Yes, authored by two economic giants, Kaivan Munshi and Mark Rosenzweig. It was published by the National Bureau of Economic Research.
And I want to make this clear right up front. This isn't some philosophical essay.
Not at all.
They used ruthless, hardcore data to prove something that will make modern political scientists literally sick to their stomachs.
Because they proved that ancient, supposedly backward caste systems are actually functioning as a hyper-efficient modern governance tool.
It is like sharing the biggest, most scandalous secret about how the world actually works.
Which is exactly why this research is so compelling. I mean, Western theory insists that formal democracy is the pinnacle of institutional design.
But the data just completely says otherwise.
Completely. So, to understand how an ancient bloodline network could possibly outperform a modern constitutional ballot box, we have to start with the failure of the vote itself.
We have to look at what happens when common sense goes totally bankrupt.
Right. So, here is the trap. If a highly capable politician gets elected, they will immediately betray your needs.
Wait, immediately?
Immediately. It's the brutal, counterintuitive reality of the voter's dilemma.
So as a voter, do you vote for a genius who ignores you or a loyal idiot who actually listens?
Exactly. Let's unpack this. We need to physically put ourselves in the shoes of the people living in these villages.
Let's build that picture. You are living in a small rural village in India.
We are talking about a ward of maybe 70 households. This is incredibly intimate, hyper-local governance.
And you are poor. You're working in agriculture or maybe day labor.
Right. And what you desperately need to survive, what your kids need to not fall ill, are the absolute basics.
Like clean drinking water piped to your street.
Yes. You need basic sanitation and sewers.
So an election comes up, you look at the candidates, you want someone who can go to the regional government, navigate the bureaucracy, and fight for a massive budget.
You want a highly competent leader. Naturally.
So you scan the village for the most capable individual.
Who is the person with the most managerial experience? Who knows how to negotiate?
It's the wealthy farmer, right?
Oh,
the local business owner.
Exactly. They have a proven track record. They manage resources, turn a profit, deal with external markets. They are undeniably the high competence candidate.
But here's the fatal twist. This is what you call the competence versus preference trap.
Right. This wealthy, highly capable business manager has an entirely different set of life experiences than you do.
And because their life is different, their preferences are totally different.
Exactly. The wealthy farmer already has a private well. They already have personal sanitation.
So what do they actually want from the local government?
They want electricity. They want paved roads so their trucks can get goods to the market faster. They want streetlights.
Oh, I see. So if you elect the brilliant manager, he will use all of his incredible talent to secure a massive budget from the state.
And then he will turn around and spend every single penny of that massive budget on streetlights for his own business.
Meanwhile, you and your kids are still drinking dirty water.
Exactly. You want their competence. But you know their preferences will destroy you.
It's this horizontal conflict, like what kind of public goods we want completely crushes the vertical pursuit of how capable the leader is.
Right. As a rational voter, you realize a competent leader will simply use their massive skills to build things you do not need.
Wait, so grassroots democracy actually punishes talent?
It really does.
It's like, it's like refusing to hire a Michelin star chef to cook for you because you know they'll stubbornly refuse to make the simple burger you actually want to eat.
That is a perfect analogy.
They'll use all their culinary genius to make some, like, complex foam dish that leaves you starving.
Right, so you hire the fry cook instead.
Because at least the fry cook will make the burger, even if it's mediocre.
Exactly. In the village context, you vote for the candidate who is just like you, the candidate who also desperately needs clean drinking water.
Even if this candidate is totally incompetent.
Even if they can only manage to secure a tiny, pathetic budget from the regional government.
At least you know, with absolute certainty, that that tiny budget will be spent on water.
Because the second a politician takes office, you lose all control over them.
Right. In a small village setting like this, there are no powerful, organized political parties to keep candidates in check.
There is no rigid party platform they are forced to adhere to. The election essentially equals a total loss of control for the voter.
Once they win, you lose.
The politician does whatever their personal traits dictate. This is known as the dictatorship of personal will.
We like to think that the democratic office forces a person to serve the public good.
But the data shows that politicians are ultimately slaves to their personal realities.
Give me some global context for this. Is this just an Indian village problem, or is this, like, human nature?
Oh, it is entirely human nature. The researchers actually cite fascinating data from the United States to prove this point.
Really? What kind of data?
In the U.S. Congress, if you look at the voting records of male representatives, those who have daughters are mathematically more likely to vote for women's rights legislation than those who only have sons.
Wow. So their personal life at home dictates their public vote on the floor of the House of Representatives.
Exactly. And we see the exact same mechanism in India. When female village leaders are elected, the data shows they dramatically shift public spending toward women's preferences.
Like water and health services.
Right? Moving money away from the infrastructure preferences of men. Formal democracy just cannot force a politician to suppress their own desires.
They will always build what they personally want.
Always.
So in a normal, functioning democratic system, what is the one thing that stops a politician from acting totally selfishly?
It's the fear of getting fired.
Right. It's the desire for re-election.
Yes. The entire Western democratic model relies on the desire for re-election to keep politicians honest.
It is the leash that keeps the politician tethered to the voters' needs.
Exactly. If you build streetlights instead of water pipes, the voters will fire you in the next cycle.
But what happens when you completely sever that leash?
That is where things get truly chaotic.
What happens when a law, designed with the most noble intentions to protect the weak, accidentally becomes the terminator of all political order?
We have to talk about the storm that hit India in 1991, the 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution.
Set the stage for us. What did this amendment actually do?
So it's a fascinating piece of legislation. It was meant to be beautiful. It was meant to be the ultimate equalizer for a deeply stratified society.
Because India recognized its rural villages were plagued by historical inequality.
Right. For centuries, power was concentrated in the hands of upper castes and men. So this amendment mandated a three-tier system of local government.
And to ensure fairness, it implemented a system of randomized reservation.
Quotas, basically. But not fixed quotas. That is the critical distinction.
Okay, what do you mean by not fixed?
These were rotating, randomized quotas. The law mandated that 1/3 of all village council seats must be reserved for women.
Okay, that makes sense.
Furthermore, seats had to be reserved for marginalized groups in proportion to their population in the district.
Just for our listeners who might not know Indian constitutional law, what are these marginalized groups specifically called in the data?
They refer to scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and other backward castes.
And what do those designations mean in plain English?
Sure. These are official designations for historically disadvantaged groups. The scheduled castes primarily refer to communities formerly considered untouchable in the traditional hierarchy.
Right.
And scheduled tribes refers to indigenous communities often living in isolated areas. The government uses these lists to provide affirmative action.
So on paper, this sounds incredibly progressive. You are mathematically guaranteeing that the most marginalized people get a seat at the table.
On paper, it is a total triumph of equity. But in reality, on the ground, it created a devastating side effect.
Because it completely destroyed predictability.
Exactly, because the reservations were randomized and rotating. Every 5 years, the rules of who was legally allowed to run for office would completely scramble.
Walk me through that. If I am a politician and my seat was reserved for a woman this term, what happens in the next election?
The reservation lottery spins again. Next term, your seat might be reserved for a scheduled caste member,
Okay.
or it might be reserved for an other backward caste member, or it might just become an open, unreserved seat.
Wow. So the probability of your specific demographic profile matching the randomized reservation criteria for your seat twice in a row is?
It is vanishingly small, which means the chance of a politician running for their own seat again is basically zero.
The data in this study is absolutely brutal on this point.
It is. Because of this randomized system, only 14.8% of representatives have ever held office before.
Less than 15%. That is an unbelievable number.
It is the death of re-election. It is the systemic eradication of the political career.
And this raises a chilling question.
Right. If Western democracy relies on the desire for re-election to keep politicians honest, what happens when you mathematically guarantee that a politician will be fired?
Yeah. If I am a politician, and I know with 100% certainty that my job is ending in 5 years, no matter how well I perform, my behavior fundamentally changes.
Absolutely.
If I know my job is ending on Friday, I am stealing the office supplies on Wednesday.
It's exactly that logic.
I am looting the treasury.
Uh-huh.
I am giving every government contract to my cousin. I am going crazy with power because there are zero consequences.
This is known in political science as the extreme lame duck effect.
Because there is absolutely no incentive to listen to the voters.
None. You cannot be rewarded for good behavior, and you cannot be punished for bad behavior at the ballot box.
How does a village survive this?
They shouldn't be able to.
Let's tally up the disaster so far. First, voters intentionally elect mediocre people because they are terrified of competent people ignoring their preferences.
Right.
Second, once those mediocre people are in power, they realize they can never be reelected, so they have total free reign to act as selfishly as possible.
This shouldn't just be inefficient governance. This should be a total apocalyptic anarchy.
It should be a complete collapse of public services. But according to every textbook, it should have fallen into absolute ruin.
But it did.
It didn't. Because when the formal laws failed, something else woke up.
The shadow network.
Yes, the shadow network. When formal state insurance doesn't exist and the ballot box is totally broken, why is betraying your caste considered a punishment far worse than going to prison?
We need to introduce the real power broker in this story, the jati.
The jati. Let's define that, because Western audiences often misunderstand what caste actually means in this context.
You really need to be incredibly precise about this. The jati is the sub-caste.
Right. When we hear the word caste in the West, we usually think of a loose social label, like a rigid class system, maybe like Victorian England, rich people at the top, poor people at the bottom.
It is entirely different from a class system. A class system is primarily economic. The jati is a matter of absolute biological survival.
You do not earn your way into a jati.
And you cannot buy your way out of it. You are born in it and you die in it.
Highlight the extreme insularity for us. How closed off are these networks?
The data is just staggering. Less than 5% of marriages in these rural areas cross caste lines.
Wow, less than 5%.
Over 95% of people marry strictly within their specific subcaste. This creates a deeply entrenched, multi-generational network of unbreakable blood ties.
Ties that span across multiple villages. It's not just a social club where you meet for tea.
Not at all. It is the ultimate, inescapable insurance network.
Explain that. Why insurance?
You have to picture the economic reality of the rural Indian landscape. There is no state-sponsored unemployment insurance.
If you lose your job, the government does not send you a check.
Exactly. There is no universal health care net. If you have a massive medical emergency, there is no public hospital that will save you for free.
There are no corporate bank loans for poor farmers who lack collateral.
So what happens when disaster strikes? If a drought hits and your crops fail, who buys the grain so your children don't starve?
The jj.
Yes. The elders of your subcaste pool their resources and feed your family.
If you get sick and need expensive medicine, who pays the doctor?
The jj.
If your daughter reaches marriageable age and you desperately need a dowry to secure her future, who provides the capital?
The jati. It is your bank, your hospital, your insurance agency, and your social universe. It is literally everything.
And this brings us to the core, mind-bending hypothesis of these researchers.
Right. They hypothesized that this ancient survival-based social network didn't just fade away when modern democracy was introduced.
Instead, it extended its invisible tentacles directly into the modern democratic ballot box.
They identified what we can call the shadow contract.
The shadow contract. Because the formal democratic contract between the voter and the politician was broken by those randomized reservations.
Exactly. So the Jati stepped in and drafted a new invisible contract.
How does it work mechanically? What does the shadow network actually do during an election?
Well, first, the Jati acts as a political machine. They identify the candidate, they fund the campaign, they organize the voting bloc.
Like a traditional political party?
Yes, but more importantly, they provide the post-election discipline that the randomized reservation system destroyed.
They hold the invisible noose.
Precisely. They do not need legal contracts. They do not need the formal threat of a future election.
Because the threat they hold over the politician's head is far more terrifying than simply losing a job.
The threat is social death.
Walk us through what social exile literally looks like. If a politician goes rogue, what actually happens?
Okay, imagine you are the politician, you get elected, you decide you are going to use the village budget to build a streetlight for your own farm.
Completely ignoring the fact that my Jati desperately needs a clean water well.
Exactly. You betray the shadow contract.
The elders of the Jati don't take me to court.
No, they simply cut you off. You are exiled from the network.
Which means what, practically?
It means when your term ends in 5 years, because remember, you cannot be reelected, you return to civilian life as a ghost.
Wow.
When your son needs a wife, no one in that 95% closed marriage market will accept him. Your bloodline ends.
And financially?
When your crops fail the following year, the Jati does not bail you out. You starve.
So betraying your caste is literally a financial and biological death sentence.
It is a punishment infinitely worse than any Democratic voter could ever inflict.
What is so fascinating about this is the cold, calculating efficiency of the mechanism.
Right. The ancient caste system, a social structure thousands of years old, is stepping in to solve the exact commitment problem that modern democratic theory could not fix.
It solves the lame duck crisis.
Exactly. The politician might be a lame duck formal representative, safe from the wrath of the ballot box, but they are a lifelong member of the Jati.
The formal term limit means absolutely nothing compared to the eternal reality of the bloodline.
The politician is forced to become a willing puppet of the Jati's collective will.
This sounds like a brilliant dystopian political thriller.
Yeah.
But a theory is just a theory.
True.
How on earth did two economists sitting in the Ivy League actually prove that this invisible mafia is pulling the strings?
It's an invisible network. How do you measure a shadow?
You measure it with an unprecedented, almost psychotic level of data collection.
We have to talk about the REDS survey.
The 2006 Rural Economic and Development Survey. This is where the detective work of the study truly shines.
This is not a small sample size. This is a microscope applied to 100,000 households.
100,000, that is massive.
They looked at data spanning 13 major Indian states, analyzing 136 villages over 3 full election cycles.
And they didn't just ask people who they voted for, right? They tracked the physical reality of the villages.
They tracked drinking water, roads, sewers, electricity, and streetlights.
But here is the genius part. They didn't just look at the village's overall budget. They mapped the infrastructure down to the specific street level.
Yes, I want the listener to really visualize this. The researchers sent teams to these remote villages.
They literally walked down dirt paths.
They noted exactly where the fresh pavement stopped. They marked the GPS coordinates of a newly installed water pipe.
And then they knocked on the door of the house, sitting directly next to that water pipe, and they recorded the specific sub-caste identity of the family living there.
It is forensic accounting for public infrastructure.
It's incredible. They cross-referenced the physical location of the public goods with the demographic makeup of the streets.
And then correlated that with the caste identity of the elected politician.
And within this massive mountain of data, digging through the street-level maps of 100,000 households, they found a mathematical magic number.
They found the activation code for the shadow network.
The 50% tipping point.
Yes.
How can a tiny, invisible 2% shift in population determine the absolute life and death of a village's infrastructure?
Well, the researchers proved that the Jati shadow network does not operate at all times.
Okay.
It only activates its total control over a politician when one specific mathematical condition is met.
Which is?
The largest eligible subcaste must cross exactly 50% of the voter population in that specific ward.
Walk us through the math of this. If the largest Jati in the village makes up 49% of the voters, what happens?
At 49%, the Jati KT cannot guarantee a win on its own. It does not have the absolute majority.
Right, so to get their candidate elected, they have to reach across the aisle.
They have to form messy, informal coalitions with other minority castes. They have to promise favors.
And because the coalition is mixed, the discipline falls apart.
Exactly. The threat of social exile only works within your own bloodline.
That makes sense.
If the politician owes their victory to 3 different castes, no single caste has total leverage over them.
So at 49%, it is political chaos. It is normal, messy, inefficient, unconstrained democracy.
The politician gets into office and does whatever they want.
But cross that line, hit 51%.
At 51%, total control is achieved. The dominant Jati does not need a single outside vote.
They can mathematically dictate the winner purely through internal discipline.
They can say to their candidate, "We are putting you in power. You owe nothing to anyone else. You owe everything to us. Obey or be exiled."
The researchers actually graphed this, didn't they? Paint a picture of this data visualization for the listener, because you said it is absolutely brutal.
It is one of the most striking graphs in modern economic literature. They plotted the probability that the winning candidate belongs to the dominant caste against that caste share of the population.
So on the horizontal axis, you have a population percentage moving from 10% up to 100%.
Right. And on the vertical axis, you have the probability of that caste winning the election.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
And as you follow the line from left to right, as the population grows from 30% to 40% to 45%, the line just hovers.
It bumps along randomly.
Yeah, showing maybe a 40 to 45% win probability.
It's messy. It's uncertain.
But the exact moment the population hits that 50% line, the very instant it crosses the threshold of absolute majority, the graph violently leaps.
It shoots straight up to 65%. It is a vertical cliff on the page.
There is no smooth transition. There is no gradual curve. There is no gray area.
The researchers used a rigorous statistical technique called discontinuity regression, right?
Yes. Let's unpack discontinuity regression for those of us who haven't taken a stats class in a decade.
What does that actually mean in plain English?
And imagine you are walking up a gentle hill, and suddenly the ground completely drops out from under you, leaving a sheer cliff face.
Okay.
Discontinuity regression is a mathematical way of proving that the cliff is real, and not just an optical illusion caused by bad data.
It proves that the rules of gravity fundamentally changed the moment you stepped over the edge.
Exactly. In this study, it proves that the behavior of the voters at 49.9% is fundamentally mathematically different from the behavior of the voters at 50.1%.
It is a ruthless, instantaneous transfer of power.
It really is.
It's like a sleeper agent activation code in a spy movie. For decades, the network is dormant. It's just a social club. It's just a marriage market.
But the second the local demographics shift and the population hits 50%, a switch flips.
The sleeper agent opens its eyes. The shadow network takes the wheel.
And here is where it gets really interesting. We have established that the shadow network takes control at 50%.
But to truly understand the impact, we have to look at what the network actually does with that power.
This brings us back to the great democratic trap we talked about at the beginning, the return of meritocracy.
Think back to the voter's dilemma, the competence versus preference trap.
The Michelin star chef versus the fry cook.
You desperately want the brilliant manager's skills, but you are terrified he will build streetlights for his business instead of water pipes for your family.
So in a normal election, you vote for the mediocre fry cook.
But what happens when the shadow network activates?
What happens when the Jati has a 100% guaranteed win and, more importantly, holds the power of social death over the politician's head?
The fear evaporates. The trap is sprung.
The voters suddenly realize the brilliant manager cannot betray them. The leash is secured.
Because if the millionaire manager gets elected and dares to build streetlights for his business instead of water pipes for his Jati, the Jati will destroy his life.
They will excommunicate his family.
So in these incredibly poor, destitute villages, the masses suddenly wake up one day, cross that 50% threshold, and unanimously vote for the wealthiest, most elite corporate manager in town.
The reemergence of the elite, the data confirming this, is breathtaking.
Let's look at the numbers. What happens to the quality of the politician the second that 50% line is crossed?
The proportion of politicians with actual formal business management experience explodes.
By how much?
It jumps from 0.5 to 0.8. That is a massive 30% spike in managerial competence the instant the shadow network takes over.
And their wealth.
The land wealth of the elected leaders shoots straight up. We see a massive 56% increase in the land value of the winning politician.
So they are electing the richest, smartest, most capable elites in the region.
Yes. This is a massive paradigm shift. It completely changes how we view the voters.
The voters aren't stupid. They never wanted the mediocre guy.
They didn't vote for the fry cook because they love bad burgers.
They always wanted the genius manager. They understood the value of high competence perfectly well.
But they only dare to elect the rich genius when the shadow network has a tight enough leash around his neck to control him.
It is a breathtaking display of rational, calculated behavior by incredibly poor voters.
Yeah.
They are playing 3D chess with their institutions.
Hold on, I want to push back on this because a skeptical listener might see a flaw in the logic here.
What's the flaw?
Couldn't you argue that maybe, just maybe, when a caste hits 50% of the population, they just naturally have a larger group of people, and therefore they happen to have smarter people in their group?
Right. Did the village just magically get an influx of geniuses? Did the water in the talent pool fundamentally change?
The researchers anticipated this exact counter-argument. It's the talent pool myth.
And how did they debunk it?
To debunk it, they looked at the underlying population. They didn't just look at who won. They measured the 25th and 75th percentiles of all potential candidates in these wards.
They measured the wealth and education of everyone who could legally run for office.
Exactly. And when they graphed the talent pool, it was a totally flat line.
It does not budge a single millimeter at the 50% mark.
Not at all. The water in the pool didn't change at all. There was no magical influx of smart people.
The brilliant managers were always living there. They were always eligible to run. The voters simply refused to select them.
It is strictly the selection magic that changed.
The invisible hand of the caste simply reached out, grabbed the smartest, richest guy in the room by the collar, and said, "It is your turn. Serve us or face exile."
We need an impartiality check right here. It is very important to contextualize this for the listener.
Yes, absolutely. We are talking about caste systems, globally and historically. The caste system is universally condemned as a toxic social tumor.
It represents deeply entrenched systemic inequality. It has been the source of immense human suffering and marginalization.
We are not taking sides on whether caste systems or modern democracies are morally superior. We are not endorsing the caste system in any way, shape, or form.
We are purely staring at the cold, raw data of human behavior.
We are observing how human beings solve complex coordination problems when formal institutions break down and fail them.
And the raw data proves a highly uncomfortable reality for political scientists.
That the ancient informal network forces a true meritocracy that the modern formal ballot box completely failed to achieve on its own.
Which brings us to the ultimate pragmatic question. Does this mafia-style discipline actually improve the village?
Does the shadow network actually deliver the goods?
It delivers a massive governance dividend. The data proves that the activation of the shadow network instantly triggers a massive boom in public welfare.
Let's hit the numbers on this dividend. What happens to the actual physical infrastructure of the village?
When the caste leash is activated past that 50% line, the village's overall budget for public goods rockets upward.
By how much?
We see an overall budget increase of 14 to 17%.
That is a staggering increase in real-world infrastructure. That's more water pipes, more roads, more sanitation.
The elite manager uses his massive business skills, his negotiation tactics, his understanding of bureaucracy to go to the state government and violently squeeze them for cash.
And he brings it all home to the village. But wait, how do we know he isn't secretly skimming off the top?
That's a great question.
How do we know the politician is truly a puppet of the hive mind and not just getting rich off the extra budget?
The researchers proved this by measuring the evaporation of free will.
I love this part of the study. It is so dystopian, yet so mathematically elegant.
They looked at the mathematical correlation between the elected politician's personal wealth and the specific types of infrastructure that get built in the village.
Remember the rule we established earlier? Rich managers want streetlights. Poor villagers want water.
Right. So below 50%, before the network takes over, what does the correlation look like?
Below 50%, the correlation is incredibly strong.
The politician builds what he personally wants. If a wealthy guy accidentally wins in a fragmented village, he builds streetlights. His personal desires dictate public policy.
But cross the 50% line.
Above 50%, the mathematical correlation between the politician's personal desires and the village's spending drops to zero.
Absolute zero.
Absolute zero. The statistical significance vanishes completely. Their personal will entirely evaporates from the public record.
They wouldn't dare spend a single penny of that 17% budget increase on their own preferences.
They are completely subsumed by the will of the median voter in their subcaste.
It's wild. The network literally uploads its consciousness into the politician.
It deletes their personality, their personal preferences, their selfish desires, and replaces it with the hive mind's agenda.
If the hive mind wants sanitation, the millionaire manager builds sanitation. End of story.
But perhaps the most face-slapping, counterintuitive proof of this network's power comes from looking at the women politicians.
The Iron Lady transformation. This is where the data completely breaks your expectations.
We mentioned earlier that the 1991 amendment mandated random quotas, forcing women into power in these deeply patriarchal rural villages.
Below the 50% line, when the shadow network is dormant, how do these female politicians perform?
It is exactly as grim as you would expect in a traditional male-dominated society.
These women have been historically excluded from business, from education, and from politics. They lack formal management experience.
The data shows that below the threshold, these female leaders are mathematically 5 to 6% less efficient than men at securing budgets from the regional government.
They are treated as political flower vases.
Yeah.
They are ignored by the regional bureaucrats. They are disrespected by the local men. They are basically set up to fail.
But then the demographics shift. You cross the 50% line, the sleeper agent activates.
The shadow network wakes up, and the caste network realizes a terrifying truth.
Because of the randomized reservation system, this specific female leader is their sole vessel for survival this term. She holds the only key to the treasury.
If she fails, the jati starves. If she's ignored by the bureaucrats, the jati doesn't get its water.
So the network surrounds her. The shadow mafia backs her with everything they have.
The elders, the wealthy men, the entire organizational weight of the subcaste rallies behind her.
The patriarchal barriers are instantly dismantled, not out of a sudden awakening to feminist ideals, but out of pure, ruthless mathematical self-interest.
And the numbers flip, violently.
Past the 50% threshold, the female politicians do not just catch up to the men. They become 11 to 12% more efficient than the men at securing public goods.
More efficient. It swings from negative 6% to positive 12%.
The caste network turns these marginalized women into unstoppable governance iron ladies.
They execute the network's will with terrifying efficiency, backed by the implicit threat of the entire jati.
It is the ultimate paradox. The ancient conservative patriarchal caste system, the very institution that historically oppressed women, suddenly becomes the greatest engine for female political empowerment in the region.
Because survival dictates it.
It is a stunning testament to the adaptability of these informal networks. But we have to talk about the dark side.
There is always a dark side. In the middle of this incredible efficiency carnival, in the middle of these massive budget booms and Iron Lady transformations, we have to ask a very serious question.
Who is locked outside in the dark?
Who is paying the bloody, unacknowledged price for this localized miracle?
Because this shadow order isn't a utopia, it isn't a magical fairy tale of community harmony.
No, it is a hyper-efficient mafia. And mafias, by their very definition, only take care of their own.
This brings us to the suboptimal exclusion.
Remember that street-level mapping the researchers did? The microscopic tracking of every single water pipe and streetlight across 100,000 households?
That data reveals a chilling geographic reality.
The newly won water pipes, the fresh pavement, the bright streetlights that the elite manager fought so hard for.
They are ruthlessly routed only to the streets where the dominant caste lives.
Exactly. The researchers mapped it out. If the dominant jati lives on the north side of the village, the water pipes go north.
And the pipes stop dead, literally abruptly terminate at the border of the south side.
If you are a minority living in the exact same village, you are structurally starved.
You are institutionally ghosted. You live in the dark. You drink the dirty water.
While the dominant caste right next door, maybe 50 yards away, enjoys a 17% boom in infrastructure, you get absolutely nothing.
You are completely shut out of the democratic dividend.
The mechanism that guarantees the roads get built is the exact same mechanism that guarantees the marginalized neighbor stays thirsty.
The shadow contract requires exclusion to function.
If the Jati shared the water with everyone in the village, if they acted like a true, benevolent public government, they would lose their leverage.
The reward for obedience to the shadow network must be exclusive to the members of the network.
It is a zero-sum game of survival. The efficiency of the network is entirely fueled by the exclusion of the minority.
And this grim reality reveals the ultimate limitation, the spatial bottleneck of the shadow network.
Right. A listener might be thinking, if this system is so hyper-efficient at forcing politicians to actually do their jobs, why doesn't this run the whole country?
Why isn't the national parliament run this way?
Because bloodlines do not scale.
Explain the physics of that limitation.
The entire system, the whole engine of this meritocracy, relies entirely on the threat of social exile. It relies on the invisible noose.
That threat only works in a microenvironment. It only works in a village of 70 households where everyone knows your mother.
Where everyone knows your cousins. Where the village elders can physically walk to your house and block your marriage prospects.
It requires extreme intimacy to enforce the terror.
Exactly. Now try to scale that up. Move from the village ward to the district level or the state level. Suddenly, you are dealing with populations in the millions.
The demographics mix.
The 50% dominance shatters. No single subcaste can mathematically dominate a state of 50 million people. You are forced back into messy coalitions.
But more importantly, the threat vanishes.
If you are a state-level politician living in a massive metropolitan city, the Jati becomes a tiny minority in a sea of strangers.
The threat of social exile becomes completely meaningless.
If your ancestral village shuns you, you just go to a fancy restaurant in the city with your new political friends.
The shadow network's power completely collapses the moment you leave the village limits.
It is a brilliant, hyper-effective, but strictly localized Band-Aid.
It is a survival mechanism for a broken political party system at the grassroots level, but it cannot survive in the macro environment of a modern nation-state.
Which brings us to the grand truth of this entire deep dive.
Yeah.
We have to pull back and look at what this data tells us about human civilization.
We, in the modern educated world, suffer from a profound institutional arrogance.
We thought we could just drop modern democratic voting booths into a traditional ancient society and it would instantly magically modernize it.
We assumed the sheer enlightened logic of the ballot box would immediately erase thousands of years of social structure.
We thought the sacred piece of paper would win.
But formal institutions, like a written constitution or a voting machine or a randomized term limit, rarely conquer ancient traditional orders.
Instead, the exact opposite happens. The ancient networks just capture the new rules.
They hollow out the democratic machine. They wear the formal institutions like a skin suit.
And they are reborn. They adapt to the new rules, utilize the new resources, and become stronger and more efficient than before.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, sitting right now in a modern city?
You might be listening to this on a smartphone, riding a subway, or sitting in a high-rise apartment.
You probably think you are totally free from villages, from tribes, and from castes.
You think you are a purely independent, rational voter in a pure modern democracy.
But I want you to look closely at your own life. Look at the digital bubbles you live in. Look at your ideological echo chambers.
Look at the invisible social media algorithms that dictate exactly who you speak to, what news you consume, and what you're allowed to believe.
We look at the rural Indian village and marvel at the suffocating power of the Jati. We marvel at the threat of social death.
But is your world really so different?
If you deviate from your digital tribe's orthodoxy today, if you post the wrong opinion or vote for the wrong candidate in your social circle, what happens?
You are canceled. You are socially exiled. You might lose your job. You are digitally starved.
It's the exact same threat of social death. It enforces the exact same total obedience.
It forces you to suppress your individual nuance to serve the hive mind of your digital caste.
The mechanism is universal. Humans will always build shadow networks to enforce loyalty when they feel the formal systems are failing them.
We think we have escaped the ancient bloodline networks because we live in cities and use apps. But have we?
Or have we actually just been quietly, seamlessly trapped in a brand new, highly customized, perfectly efficient digital caste system?
You hold a ballot in your hand, But who or what network is really pulling the lever?
Keep questioning the surface of the world around you.
Because the shadow order is always there, waiting to activate. Let that sink in.